Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Holy Cow. Oh God. This is going to be a review that is not for the faint of heart. I am reviewing the book Cows by Matthew Stokoe, which was recommended by the viewer Bhumika Sachitha. And before I get started, I will treat this book as delicately as I can, but I would like to give a fair warning that there are scenes in this book that regard infant death, scat eating, animal abuse, and even animal sex abuse. And if you don't care to hear about these subjects, then I highly suggest that you skip the spoilers section of this video, because that's where I'm going to be talking about those edgier scenes. But if this is something that you don't care to hear about whatsoever, then I highly recommend that you click away now and enjoy a different video on this channel. Because not only do I consider this book to be a work of transgressive fiction, it is also extreme literature. And it got so dark that I honestly had no other choice but to laugh in order to save my sanity. Which, by the way, if you don't know what transgressive fiction is, it is a genre of literature that focuses on characters who feel confined by the norms and expectations of society, and who break free from those confines in unusual or illicit ways. Well, now that everyone has received a fair warning, I would like to thank Bhumika Sachitha for recommending this title, as this is a book I had been debating about for the last few years, but I was never actually brave enough to buy it. Then when I received this recommendation, I went on and took the dive, and I'm glad that I did. So, without further ado, let's join Stephen and see what a normal day is like in the slaughterhouse. Cows by Matthew Stokoe introduces the character Stephen, who has suffered severe mental and physical abuse from his mother throughout his life. And over the last 9 years, his only companion has been his pet dog, who is simply named Dog. However, he's not able to have a playful relationship with his pet, as his abusive mother had one day hit Dog with a brick, which caused its back legs to become paralyzed. Aside from his friendship with Dog, Stephen has developed a love interest with his new neighbor named Lucy. And as a form of escapism, he turns to family-oriented sitcoms where he daydreams of one day having a happy and normal family. Meanwhile, Stephen has recently started working at a slaughterhouse. But unfortunately, this facility is ran by a sadistic pervert who enjoys grooming those around him into having no limits. And while Stephen has become a new point of interest for Crips, we eventually learn that some of the cows who have escaped this slaughterhouse need Stephen to lead them into a revolution. In an interview conducted by Raoul McClammy, Matthew Stokoe explained after he wrote multiple screenplays that were never produced, he decided to write a novel, and he set out to write what he wanted to write. Upon producing Cows, he noted he lived in the UK, which was a poor place to be at that time if he didn't have money. Also, there was a lot of social dissatisfaction, and he noticed how society there had grown ignorant and violent. As he wrote Cows, he didn't plot it, plan it, and he didn't even know there would be cows in it. While forming the lead character, Stephen, he explained that he placed his own desires of longing for normality in that character. Fun facts! Here's a few things you might not know about Matthew Stokoe. Matthew Stokoe graduated from the University of London, where his major regarded economics. In 1983, he was the guitarist for the goth band called Hack Hack, where they released one album called Despite Amputations. Throughout his career, He has co-written an internet comic called Flick and Jube. His novels include High Life, Empty Mile, and Colony of Whores. His favorite authors include Raymond Chandler, Hubert Selby Jr., and Nelson Algren. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers section, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, all you have to do is scroll down to the comments section, and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top with a timestamp in it. Once you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about some of the most disturbing moments in this book. First up is Gummy's death scene. Now, prior to this, we understand that Gummy is one of the slaughterhouse workers who has been sexually gratifying himself with the cows. And while this has been going on, Cripps one day brings Stephen to the area where they have been brutalizing the livestock. And this is when Cripps explains to Stephen that what he has thought is horror, he will soon come to realize is actually glory. Well, at this point, Stephen notices that the area where the cows are held in place is covered with a tarp and something's moving under the tarp. Then, when Cripps removes the tarp, he sees that Gummy has been tied up like a turkey, and Cripps hands him some shears and explains for him to open Gummy up. So, pretty much, you have where Stephen takes the shears, he puts a blade up Gummy's ass, and cuts him from his rectum to his skull. Then, to add the cherry on the cake, Stephen pukes into the open wound. I would like to stress that I did not feel a damn thing for Gummy or any of the other perverts in this book. However, the idea of getting cut open by having shears rammed up your ass really does something to a person's senses. And aside from this scene being a total gross out, I feel like it was also an important moment in Stephen's life, because when he walked away from this brutal kill, it seems like he has this toxic empowerment about him where he thinks he can do whatever he wants to anyone or anything. On top of that, I honestly have never seen or read anything like this before, so kudos to the author for thinking outside of the box. The next disturbing moment was when Stephen murdered his mother. Now, before this happened, Stephen had taken over cooking because his mother had previously been preparing meals that were not fit for human consumption. So, to turn the tables, he ups the ante by serving up his own shit to his mother and himself to eat. And even once or twice, he produces diarrhea for their consumption. Anywho, one day Stephen comes home and his mother attacks him, which in turn Dog attacks her because he's trying to save Stephen. However, his mother is able to pull Dog off and smash him into the wall, which of course kills him. And while she's preoccupied with this, Stephen gains the upper hand and knocks the bitch out. Well, after she comes to, she discovers that she's been tied up, and Stephen has had it with her shit. So he pulls out all of her teeth, he takes some tissue and shoves some tissue up both of her nostrils. Then he tapes her face to his ass and defecates down her throat until she suffocates. So, even though scat horror is not my flavor and I don't go out seeking it, I feel like it was somewhat justified for this book, because with Stephen's feeding methods and how he killed his mother, it really felt like this was him saying, I'm no longer going to take your shit, you're about to take mine. And it kind of reminded me of that whole idea of you can dish it out but not take it. And with that in mind, his mother totally struggled with eating the diarrhea and shit that he had served up to her. But to show that she was strong willed, she kept going, and of course, it never got any better. But regardless of if I'm looking too deeply into this or not, especially with how the tables felt like they had turned so greatly, this was truly a moment that had me squirming in my seat, and it was so disgusting I had no choice but to do a joke video on TikTok about how I felt about this. So, if you would like to check out that video, I have included a link in the description section of this episode. The final disturbing moment was Lucy's death. Now, throughout the book, Lucy has been obsessed with the idea that everyone and everything has this growing black lump of poison within them. And it's to the point where she's watching autopsy videos, trying to see where the poison might be in the dead body, and she's giving herself constant colonoscopies to see if she can find the poison within herself. Well, eventually she gets pregnant with Stephen's child, and she one day wakes up and thinks that the child she's carrying isn't a fetus at all. Instead, it's actually the lump of poison that's growing within her. So, to rid herself of this poison, she tries to put her hand up herself to pull it out, but she can't get past her knuckles. And when this happens, she ends up taking a knife and she cuts from her vagina to her rectum, which allows her to get more of her hand up inside of her, but she still can't get a grip on the fetus. So, with nothing to lose, she gives herself a C-section, and when she removes the fetus, she and the baby both die. Although I was afraid something like this was going to happen, I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to be executed. And even though this was another gross out moment, I tend to think that with Lucy imagining these lumps of poison, this is her giving a physical image to the darkness that's inside of us. May that darkness be depression, anxiety, hatred, or all of the above. Which, because of how this is presented, I tend to think that the author is suggesting that each of us are poisonous to a degree. Y'all, for real, I honestly don't know who to bitch about here, because aside from Lucy, everyone in this book were sick and twisted perverts who seemed like their main objective was to embrace their hedonism with no limits. And even though Stephen didn't start out that way, he eventually became pretty damn sadistic. But out of everyone in this book, I would have to rank the Hag Beast and Cripps at the top of the shit list. Because had the Hag Beast not been this sadistic, abusive blue waffle, then Stephen could have had a halfway decent life, and I doubt he would have grown from being a victim into a victimizer. Then we have Cripps, who is nothing but a disgusting pervert who not only gets the drips off of killing and torturing, but he enjoys grooming people into lowering themselves to the same heap of trash that he's been wallowing in. And when I meet characters this disgusting, I tend to think that there's no death that's good enough for them. However, Stokoe does a pretty damn good job in making these asshats suffer. Cows by Matthew Stokoe was a shock to the senses, as it provided disgusting scenarios and irredeemable characters. As far as themes are concerned, this book seems like it really focused on the desire to be normal, but never being able to reach that normality. Also, I noticed themes in regards to the world's brutality, power struggles, and society ranking. Character-wise, as I said, everyone in this book was irredeemable, and at first, even though I felt sorry for Stephen, that sorrow was quickly replaced by repulsion. And even though he was successfully able to break free from his everyday life, the outcome was extremely disturbing. And as far as feeling sorrow for any of the characters, the only person who I really felt sorrow for was Lucy, simply because she felt like she had an untreated mental illness. But other than that, I was really hoping that the cows would have had a successful uprise because of the abuse that had been done to them. Theme wise, I notice where Stephen yearned for a good and normal life. Because while he has been stuck in this nightmare world with his mom, he does understand that there is a better life out there where he can be normal. Which, at the end of the day, what is normal? Well, I tell you one thing, it sure as shit isn't this book. But throughout the story, Stephen watches nothing but wholesome family TV sitcoms as a form of escapism. And even though this does provide him the escapism that he needs, it also instills upon him a false hope. Because what we're seeing in these fictional shows is a wholesome normality that cannot be obtained in reality. So, this is something that kind of comes to him as a shock, or at least what I believe was a shock, because as he was getting ready to break free from everything, he's in the idea that he's going to have a good and normal life. But then when he finally has that opportunity to break free, there is nothing good and normal about it. Which this brings me to the subject of reality being brutal. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is turn on the news or bring up social media, and you'll see a story of someone being abused or a homicide that has taken place. So, with that in mind, Stokoe takes the reality of our world and puts it under a magnifying glass to remind us that we are far from being peaceful and civilized. Which this kind of reminds me of something I had heard a long time ago, which I'm sure I'm misquoting it, but it went something along the lines of think about the most disturbing act that you can conceive. Then realize someone out there is doing that horrible act right now. Next up, it felt like everyone in this book was dealing with a power struggle. Like, for example, we have Lucy who's trying to gain power over her body and rid herself of the imaginary poison that she thinks is inside her. Then we have Stephen, who had been reduced as a human being due to his abusive mother, which he eventually overpowers. Then we have where Cripps is encouraging Stephen's toxic empowerment, which this eventually backfires on Cripps. But aside from them, we do have the cows who come into play, which the cows are on the bottom of the list. And when they first step onto page, they are completely powerless. However, as we continue reading, we see that they grow from being the victim into the victimizers. Then, eventually, we even have a power struggle between Stephen and the Guernsey cow, where as they are planning to have a revolution, there is a debate on who will be in charge after that revolution takes place. And last, this book really feels like it focuses on society ranking. Like, for example, we see where a group of workers are performing under a corrupt leader, and in turn, this causes them to become corrupt. Which, under the workers, this is where the cows come into play because they are literally on the bottom of the list. And because of them being on the bottom, they are treated the worst and they have suffered the greatest. Which this gets to a point in the book where the cows have decided enough is enough, and it's time to flip the script where they can have a revolution. Overall, cows didn't scare me or creep me out. However, this is perhaps the most disgusting book I've ever read. Also, I was pretty surprised to see that we had talking cows who could simply talk for no reason whatsoever. But to be honest, this book was so entertaining and well written that I didn't mind not knowing how these cows had the ability to talk. Cows by Matthew Stokoe is like what would happen if John Waters' Pink Flamingos and George Orwell's Animal Farm birthed an abomination, killed it, ate it, shat it out, then ate it again. And while this book is full of trigger warnings from beginning to end, this was totally a dumpster fire that I could not look away from, and because of that, I read it within the matter of 2 days. So, overall, if you are looking for an absolutely disgusting read that has depraved characters while it focuses on social issues, then I do highly recommend that you read Cows by Matthew Stokoe. Just be sure that you have a barf bag with you. Now, before I close out, I would like to give a shout out to these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon as well, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos, and if there is a certain profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know, and I'll include that as well. Also, I do have a $10 tier available, and for the $10 a month, you will still receive the shout out that you see here, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you a free photo, and with that, you can print it off, do whatever you like. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you come back to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this episode, as well as a link to my Amazon wish list in case anyone wants to spoil me. Also, if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming up in the near future. So, until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.